Danielle Smith has ignited the Alberta independence movement with her ultimatum to the Prime Minister. She just met with Mark Carney again, and with the Grey Cup deadline coming fast, she's still hoping he'll fix this 9 bad laws that are strangling Alberta's energy sector. She's talking about negotiation, about hope, about maybe getting a signal from Ottawa. But here's what I keep wondering: why is she still trying so hard to make this country work when Ottawa clearly isn't? Carney hasn't repealed a single one of those laws. Not the tanker ban, not the emissions cap, not one piece of the complete mess that's been killing investment in Alberta for years. And yeah, he paused the EV rules mandate or whatever, but that's just cosmetic. Smith even floated the possibility of shipping more oil to the United States if Ottawa won't play ball, which clearly shows just how bad things have gotten. But if she knows it and we know it, why isn't she saying what half of Albertans are already thinking? You know, why wouldn't she just admit that maybe, just maybe, this country isn't fixable anymore? She keeps talking about unity, about deals, about hope, but hope doesn't pay the bills when a federal government is actively choking your province. And that's why the Alberta independence movement keeps growing, because people are tired of waiting for Ottawa to change. And they're starting to wonder if their premier is, too, or if she's still afraid to say what actually comes next. So like I said, a few months back, Premier Danielle Smith gave an ultimatum to Mark Carney and his Liberal government, saying that there were 9 bad laws that were supposed to be repealed to, quote, avoid a national unity crisis. Basically threatening separation from the rest of Canada, knowing that the independence movement in Alberta is as active as it has ever been. Here's a tweet from Keith Wilson. This week we find out, will Ottawa keep its policies holding Alberta back? Premier Smith has set out clear, fair demands so Alberta can chart its own path to prosperity. Here is what she's calling for. Have a listen.
I will soon appoint a special negotiating team to represent our province in negotiations with the federal government on the following reforms requested by our province. We hope this will result in a binding agreement that Albertans can have confidence in. Call it an Alberta Accord, if you will. First, Alberta requires guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coasts for the international export of Alberta oil, gas, critical minerals, and other resources in amounts supported by the free market, rather than by the dictates and whims of Ottawa. Every province in the country, other than Alberta and Saskatchewan, have coastal port access, and no province needs it more given the size and value of our resources. This will benefit all Canadians to the tune of trillions of dollars of economic activity, including billions for First Nations partners. Second, the federal government must end all federal interference in the development of provincial resources by repealing the No New Pipelines Law, C-69, the oil tanker ban, the net zero electricity regulations, the oil and gas emissions cap, the net zero vehicle mandate, and any federal law or regulation that purports to regulate industrial carbon emissions, plastics, or the commercial free speech of energy companies. These laws are destroying investment confidence and costing Canada and Alberta hundreds of billions in investments each year. They need to go. The federal government must provide to Alberta the same per capita federal transfers and equalization as is received by the other 3 largest provinces, Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. We have no issue with Alberta continuing to subsidize smaller provinces with their needs.
Heck, I do.
But there is no excuse for such large and powerful economies like Ontario, Quebec, BC, or Alberta.
I have an issue with subsidizing any province, particularly those that keep voting Liberal. I don't want to subsidize any of them. Alberta money should stay in Alberta.
And it needs to end. If these points can be agreed to by the federal government, I am convinced it will not only make Alberta and Canada an infinitely stronger and more prosperous country, but will eliminate the doubts a growing number of Albertans feel about the future of Alberta in Canada.
All right, so this was Premier Smith a few months back, basically outlining her demands or requests, whatever you want to call them, from the Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Carney has now been in power for well over 6 months, and he hasn't changed a single thing. I mean, he did pause the EV mandate, the electric vehicle mandate, but other than that, and by the way, it was a pause. He didn't completely eliminate it. He just paused it. Other than that, he hasn't done anything. The biggest one is the tanker ban, which is the stupidest thing ever. You can't have an Alberta oil tanker ban going on the BC coast, but the U.S. has tankers going up and down from Alaska to California and Alaska to Washington State using the exact same waters all the time. So again, it's a nonsensical mandate. It's created to landlock Alberta energy. Okay, here we have another tweet from Keith Wilson, and it goes, 8 months of Mark Carney and Alberta's 9 demands are still ignored. No pipeline, no repeal of the bad laws, no respect for this province. This is why more Albertans are choosing independence over illusion. Hashtag Alberta independence. Exactly. And then you have a video which he posted of Pierre Poilievre. This is the leader of the so-called conservatives here in Canada. He won't do much. He's a politician. He's not, again, I call conservatives in Canada liberal light. Don't trust any of them. But he does say things that make a lot of sense. He does speak truth in this particular clip. Let's have a listen.
We've been told in Alberta for weeks, if not months, that on Grey Cup week, that we would get a win in Alberta. And that win would be a pipeline to the West Coast. It would be significant commitment to action on the so-called 9 bad laws. And that would all happen Grey Cup week. That is to say tomorrow. We are also told somehow there might be some sort of memorandum of understanding between the province of Alberta and Carney. That's just floating out there. I don't know if that's confirmed. What are your thoughts? Because for weeks, months, we've been promised that Grey Cup week, the stamps aren't in, neither is Edmonton, but that Alberta would get a win on both of those files.
Well, tomorrow, it reminds me when you go into the pub, the Liberals are like that pub that has that sign on the wall that says free beer tomorrow. And so you come back the next day and it still says free beer tomorrow. And you keep coming back day after day for the promise of free beer, and the price of beer continues to rise and rise and rise. So they keep telling us that something is going to happen tomorrow. Mark Carney's been Prime Minister for 8 months, promising to move at, quote, unimaginable speeds. Get out of the way and get rid of the Liberal industrial carbon tax so that we can actually produce enough oil to fill a future pipeline. Get out of the way, Mark Carney, and do it now. It has been 8 months. We don't need Mark Carney to put on a hard hat and hold another photo op. He's had countless photo ops in the last 8 months, while investment flees and our industrial sector leaves to the United States of America. He has not got shovels in the ground on anything. Now, I suspect there will be some sort of quote-unquote memorandum. You know something? Memorandums don't pay the bills. We need shovels in ground. So Mark Carney should get out of the way and tell us on what date will shovels be in the ground on a new 1 million barrel a day pipeline from Hardisty, Alberta to Prince Rupert or Kitimat, British Columbia. That's all he's got to do.
I mean, for what it's worth, this guy spoke the truth. That's actually what needs to happen in Canada. It's just the Liberal government needs to get out of the way, because the only thing keeping Alberta landlocked is the policies by the Liberal government. The East keeping our resources locked, keeping them in the ground, which is their goal. They've said it. They want to keep them in the ground. They want green energy. They want their green scam and all that stuff. They don't want to use Alberta oil. However, they do want to continue getting the money from Alberta to continue to bribe Quebec and other provinces. We have a tweet by Mark Nixon, a more recent clip of Premier Danielle Smith speaking about her desire for the Liberal government to make certain changes, changing those 9 bad laws so that the energy industry in Alberta can actually prosper and progress. Tweet goes, Danielle Smith just called out Mark Carney's 9 bad laws strangling Alberta's economy. If they're not removed, Alberta will separate from Canada, plain and simple. The clock is ticking.
Of course, we're home to an abundance of natural resources, and we continue to champion free trade, free markets, and free enterprise. Alberta is a strong proponent of removing internal trade barriers in Canada because we know open trade equals stronger business. We removed 75% of Alberta's exceptions under the Canada Free Trade Agreement, and we continue to push for greater labour mobility, fewer regulatory barriers, and increased investment opportunities. Our government is dedicated to creating jobs for Albertans, Quebecers, and Canadians, and growing our province's economy within a united Canada. And the key word here is united.
She just keeps saying that. And it's like, lady, half of Alberta, 40 to 50% of Albertans are done with the whole united thing. And I would dare say more, because those polls normally come from mainstream news agencies, mainstream pollsters that are paid to suppress real support. They do it with certain methodology that doesn't really take into account the real support behind a certain cause. And the thing with Alberta independence is that it is heavily represented in rural Alberta. Hardworking Albertans from small towns and small cities are the ones that support Alberta independence the most. And those tend to be underrepresented in most polls. So when she talks about, we want to create jobs in Alberta, but also in Quebec and whatever else, you're not speaking for Albertans, particularly not for your base, which is 70%, 66 to 70% for Alberta independence. And we're going to end it with an article from the National Post titled, Danielle Smith says she's giving Carney until Grey Cup to fix the, quote, 9 bad laws. Smith was taking questions from the media a day after meeting briefly with Carney just before he left Ottawa for a visit to Washington, D.C. Ottawa, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is softening an ultimatum she gave Prime Minister Mark Carney several months ago, saying she hopes to negotiate a resolution of the 9 federal laws she says are throttling Alberta's oil and gas sector by Grey Cup. I can tell you, quote, I can tell you that we are hoping to have some kind of agreement with the Prime Minister by Grey Cup, where he gives a clear indication that he's prepared to address the 9 laws that have created an investment climate that is hostile to private investment, Smith told reporters in Ottawa on Tuesday. Smith was taking questions from the media a day after meeting briefly with Carney, just before he left Ottawa for a visit to Washington, D.C. She wouldn't divulge too many details from the meeting, but said she was very hopeful that she and Carney could reach an agreement on the 9 so-called bad laws. The one thing that Pierre Poilievre said that I agree with is a memorandum of understanding, which is the word that Danielle Smith has been using as some sort of win that she could extract from the Carney Liberals out of this whole negotiation thing. She thinks that that is going to appease Albertans. I don't know that that'll do it. I don't think so. Short of a real pipeline and like real a date when shovels are going to be on the ground, short of that, I don't know that that moves the needle at all. Most Albertans who support independence are dead set that Alberta would be much better off going it alone. That we would be able to negotiate pipelines from a stronger position if we were independent. That we could possibly create some sort of deal with the United States where like there's open trade. There's no border economically between the United States and Alberta. Matter of fact, the United States has been much more friendly to Alberta businesses than the rest of Canada has ever been. So again, even a pipeline, I don't think will lower the support, let alone a freaking MOU, a memorandum or whatever. That's just words, and we know that Liberals lie all the time, especially to Alberta. So we'll see what happens. Hey, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to be notified every time a new video is published, hit the subscribe button and activate the notifications bell. It's completely free and it helps our channel grow. A heartfelt thank you to all our channel members. I really appreciate your support. See you all in the next one. Peace.